Okay, good morning. My name is Amanda Rivera. I'm the hearing examiner presiding over today's case. The date is May 12th, 2025, and this is case DCI2025-00002. It is a zoning request for an IPD amendment to increase the depth of a mining operation. Because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, all evidence and testimony must be taken under oath, so if you intend to speak, if you can please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide is the truth?
I do.
I do.
Okay, thank you. And sir, I'm sorry, we have a member of the public here. Did you intend to speak today, sir?
Depending on what I hear.
Okay, would you like to take the oath? I didn't see you raise your hand.
Sure, I'm sorry.
Thank you, that's okay. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide is the truth?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So for your benefit, the way that we'll proceed this morning is first we're going to hear from the applicant. They'll present their request in the case and call any witnesses that they have. Then we will move to the county staff, who will go over their staff report and their recommendation, which is approval with conditions, and there are no deviations requested in this case. Then we'll come back after public comment, should you choose to speak, to the applicant and the staff for their rebuttal and any closing comments that they may have. So with that, we can begin. Did the staff have their affidavit of publication to enter into the record?
I will get that.
Okay, so I will reserve. We will begin, and hopefully we'll get that shortly this morning. Thank you. So good morning, if the applicant's ready to proceed.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For your record, Richard Aiken with Henderson Franklin, here this morning on behalf of the applicant on DCI 2025-00002. So before I get started, I've just got a couple of housekeeping matters. First of all, we did submit a 48-hour letter on May 6th. There were really no areas of disagreement. It was just 3 minor clarifications in the 48-hour letter. The first was just the mine expiration. We wanted to make it clear that we're not requesting an extension as part of this application. There have been some other extensions through some emergency extensions and other prior zoning history. The second was the wellfield protection. The staff report indicated that regulated substances will be restricted to an extension area. There's already a pollution prevention plan on file, and really that's not part of this, but we attached that, and I've got a copy of that for you as well. And finally, the monitoring wells, there was a proposed condition added to add a monitoring well, which we've already agreed to as part of a private settlement agreement, is already out there, so no issues with that. So with that, what I would like to provide you is a copy of our 48-hour letter, as well as the attachments noted in the 48-hour letter, specifically a copy of the pollution prevention plan, and then the master concept plan. And just for clarification on the MCP here, so on Friday, Ms. Workman submitted an updated MCP with all the sheets attached. So what I'm providing you is what she provided for everybody, whichever one's in agreement with on Friday, if you follow me.
Did my office receive something?
No, I'm going to present that in my presentation.
Okay, so then I will accept the 48-hour letter and its documents as applicant exhibit A, because that matches what I received on May 6th, I believe, was when that came in. And then the master concept plan, I will give a separate exhibit number, which would be applicant exhibit 1, and then we'll accept it again, just so we've got it correct in the record. But that is a corrected master concept plan that you have.
Yeah, so, and to be clear, to say it's corrected, I believe Ms. Workman added a sheet to the master concept plan that shows from the settlement agreement, there's an area in the settlement agreement that has a map that shows where the rock crushing is prohibited. It's described in the conditions. This map makes it clear so that there's no question about that. Ms. Workman, if I'm wrong, tell me.
That's correct.
The other thing that she added was a map showing the location of the additional monitoring well. So I've just included those in what I'm going to hand you, and nothing else has changed.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
The final thing I will provide you is 2 copies of the applicant's PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, thank you. So that'll be applicant's exhibit 2. Thank you. And this is number 2. Okay. This
is the folded one right behind.
This goes with the 48-hour that I already have.
Letter, all the MCP sheets, pollution prevention plan.
Okay. Let me get this correct over here. So the applicant exhibit 1, it's actually a composite master concept plan then. So you attached all of them, including the ones that were already provided. It's just with additions and
Correct.
clarifications. Okay, so this would be applicant exhibit 1, composite. Is that the affidavit you've got for me?
This is the affidavit.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. Not at all. While we were doing housekeeping, this is a good time to do that. Thank you. There you go. Let So the staff report was pre-labeled staff report as staff exhibit 1, so then staff exhibit 2 will be the affidavit, which is legally sufficient, so we will note that. Okay, now I am ready. Thank you.
All right. So good morning once again. We have our project team here. Matt Price with Seagate Mine LLC is here in attendance this morning. He doesn't have a presentation, but he's available for questions if you have any of him. Alexis Crespo is our AICP planner. She's with RVI Planning, and she's actually pinch hitting for Tina Ekblad. Tina did the application in this matter, but had a conflict with the date today, so Alexis is up to speed and going to present here this morning. Kirk Martin, who's our professional geologist with Water Science Associates, is here. You're going to hear from him on some of the borings and the geotechnical stuff that he knows better than I do. Ted Treesh with TR Transportation is also here. He'll talk a little bit about traffic. So on the slide before you, you can see the location of the Bell Road mine. It's got a yellow star, so it's pretty easy to tell where it is. It is on the south side of State Road 82, as you can see here. There's frontage on State Road 82 to the east of where the Alico Road extension is going to come out. So that's the location is to the east. The Alico Road extension is going to be up here. Bell Road or Bell Boulevard is directly across the street on State Road 82. So that kind of gives you some context. You can see some of the other mines back to the west. This is the Vulcan mine over here. We've got some of the zoning approvals outlined here on the left. I'm actually going to go to the next slide and provide you a little bit more detail by way of history here on some of that. So existing approvals, and I've got some of them in bold, and there's a reason for that, and I'm sure you'll know what that is. But in 1990, the property was rezoned from Ag 2 to industrial plan development to allow excavation up to 40 feet and allow mining, specifically the removal of excavated materials off-site of the project. So that began in 1990 through an IPD. In 2004, there was a rezoning that allowed mining activities to resume, so there had been some stoppage of some things, and so there had to be some cleanup in 2004. In 2014, there was an administrative amendment that removed the existing condition 1B to eliminate the maximum duration of the mine operation. At that time, it made the approval subject to the 20-year time limitation that was contained in the Land Development Code. Then in 2020, there was a rezoning that extended the expiration of the MCP until October 2034. And in 2021, there was another ADD that added conditions to comply with a private settlement agreement. So you've noted, and we've talked about that a little bit. There was a settlement agreement as a result of some other zoning action with the two neighboring properties that addressed a number of things, including the location of rock crushing, which you have that, the addition of a additional monitoring well, some water quality monitoring things. And so some conditions were added as part of that ADD in order to comply with that private settlement agreement. That agreement does contemplate that this depth increase, which we're here requesting today, could occur up to 60 feet or the confining layer, whichever comes first. In 2016, the mine operation permit for the entire property occurred. It was amended in 2020 for consistency. The term is through 2040. And then in 2024, there was a zoning extension, and the uses were extended until 2041. I see it's cut off there, but that is the correct date. So as I mentioned earlier, I've got a couple of things just bolded here primarily, and I'll get to this, but the fact that it is an existing IPD, which was done prior to 2008, and that the right to mine on the property has not expired. So both of those, and the staff report agrees, both of those conditions are in existence. So
There was a 2003 LDO as well. Is that, so is the mine operating pursuant to the three approvals, if you want to call, let's say the zoning is a codified approval, and now we've got this one, but it's got the LDO and the MOP as well?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
So the request here before you today is to amend the existing approved construction materials mine totaling 503.75 acres to allow for an increase in mine extraction depth from 40 feet to 60 feet or to the top of the confining layer, whichever is reached first. There are no proposed changes to the existing mine footprint that has been previously approved. It's really, I won't say it's basic because it's a mine and nothing is ever basic, but at the end of the day, it's very limited in scope. All we're asking to do is to go deeper within the existing mine footprint. We're not asking to change the hours of operation. We're not changing any conservation easements. Everything remains the same as far as the conditions, we've added a condition regarding the monitoring well, but it really is just to go deeper into the existing footprint. So I mentioned before the two things that I put in bold, but an existing mine is a mine operation approved by the Board of County Commissioners or hearing examiner prior to September 1, 2008 that meets the following criteria: either approved by special exception or approved as an IPD. So as I mentioned before, this mine was approved as an IPD back in 1990. And then 3, the right to pursue mining activity on either the special exception or IPD has not expired. So it has not expired as we sit here today. It still remains active. There's still active mining operations out there today. So it does meet the definition of an existing mine under 12-121A, and that is important because that allows us to pursue the limited amendment under 12-121J, which allows limited amendments to existing mine zoning approvals for depth increases within the previous approved footprint, which is, again, all we're asking to do here today. And for reference, we already have a state permit that allows us to do this, so we just have to go through the county process. We've already gone through that process. So 12-121J1C provides the application requirements, and we're going to go through those, but the updated TIS, which we provided, the integrated surface water and groundwater modeling, which Mr. Kirk is going to talk about in a few minutes, as well as the soil boring analysis, and then the other things as far as the narratives and the list of surrounding property owners have also been provided throughout this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alexis Crespo, who's going to walk through a little bit of the planning function here.
Thank you. Good morning, Alexis Crespo with RVI. On behalf of the applicant, I've been accepted in the areas of the Lee County Lee Plan, Land Development Code, and land use planning in general, and I would appreciate being accepted again today. Thank you. All right, well, Mr. Aiken laid a lot of the groundwork, so I'm going to just jump into a little bit more of the details of the current underlying IPD zoning approval tied to Z20-027 as amended per the private settlement agreement stipulations. So this is a zoomed in look at the subject property. You can see the 261 acres of mining area currently underway. You can also note the preserve areas on the slide. Those total 189 acres and are in 3 different distinct preserve areas as shown on the master concept plan, preserves A, B, and C. And those do have 25-foot buffers where that interfaces with the mine. We have obviously a large easement to our south, and then that is preserve area C on the far southern end of it. Something important to note coming out of the 2020 zoning approval was additional limitations on hours of operation of the mining functions. So that was limited per that resolution to general business operations and trucking occurring from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Excavation also limited to 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Rock crushing, obviously due to different noise and impacts of that specific function, was further limited to Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then some additional hours were offered for dragline operations from 4 to 6 p.m. Obviously, no operations occurring on Sunday. And as Richard noted, none of these things are changing. We just want to kind of memorialize and get you accommodated with the stipulations in place today per the current approval. That box cuts it off, but the current master concept plan is valid until 2041. This was actually due to an extension filed in 2024. So all of the conditions remain intact from this zoning resolution. ADD 2021 is subsequent to the private settlement agreement and incorporates some key items negotiated with neighboring property owners. The first is a prohibition on dewatering. There's a very lengthy condition in the zoning conditions that Beth has provided, noting that it's not allowed by right per this zoning action, and if they seek dewatering in the future, there's very stringent criteria they must follow and permitting required from appropriate state agencies. The other key items incorporated into the zoning for the ADD were the setbacks negotiated with the property owners. We do have a ski school to our east, and we have Sakata Seed Company to our west, and so we increased setbacks for rock crushing to 500 feet in that what I'll call the northeast corner of the site, bless you. And that's hatched, and this is what staff wisely decided to integrate into the master concept plan series per their email on Friday, just so that's crystal clear on where those rock crushing activities cannot occur. The other setback included in the ADD is the 1,000-foot prohibition on excavation, also generally in this northeast corner of the site, until 2027.
So this is not, and I know nothing is changing with respect to what's been approved, but is someone going to discuss how this is being processed currently? Because it's a little confusing. There is no plant on site from what I can tell, correct? Through,
Refer to Richard.
there's mobile crushing from what I understand. Let me, I guess, get my question out first. So that is already happening, but then there is this discussion that if there is a plant, then these are the areas where it's prohibited, which I understand are pursuant to the settlement agreement. But my question, I guess, is we're going through this process now. What process would be required if they do want to add, since there seems to be this contemplation that there might be a plant at some point, and all we're talking about are the locational standards? Similar to dewatering, the condition it says dewatering is not explicitly permitted through the zoning, but if the district allows it, then these are the things that have to go through. But what county process would be required if dewatering is sought? So it doesn't have to be answered right now, but before you move on to the next things, I just want to put that out there. I need clarification on those kinds of issues. Again, understanding that that's not, but mine operations is one of the criteria that you have to look at under 121J. And routinely, it's just said it's not changing, which I understand, but I think it's important to understand the interconnection between this contemplation of a fixed crushing plant at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We can certainly address that. In addition to the zoning approvals just noted, there's been extensive regular permitting of this site over the years through the LDO process, which was in place, as well as the mining operation permit process that came into place once Chapter 12 was adopted in 2008, and that's what's permitting off-site hauling of the materials. So all of these LDOs are in place, and to add to that, and probably most important to this case, is the recent FDEP permit, where they have signed off on the increased mining depth to 60 feet, which was issued. This is imagery of existing conditions on the site, just to show that, as noted in the staff conditions, many of the zoning conditions today have already been achieved based upon the conditions of the site. So we do have the required truck wash facility in place, shown on the left side of the screen, the scales and fully paved access to State Road 82. And then you can see on the far right the existing and substantial perimeter buffering along State Road 82, as well as those portions of the east and west property lines that are not preserved under conservation easements. So that's a 12-foot tall berm with type D plantings consisting of 5 trees per 100 linear feet, hedge, and these buffers vary in width from 150 feet along State Road 82 to 100 foot on the east and west property lines. So we've talked a little bit about the preserves already. You can see those shown in the green here. Chapter 12 of the Land Development Code requires mines to have 25% indigenous habitat in addition to upland buffers. We far exceed the minimum preservation requirements through the 189 acres of conservation, again, under conservation easement. When the FDEP reviewed the additional depth, they also looked at the preserves and their success rate and further signed off on those preserve areas as implementing the requirements per their permits. I've noted the 12-foot berm with landscaping, which also far exceed the Chapter 12 requirements to achieve compatibility and minimize the impacts of the operation. Also of note, we exceed Chapter 12 in terms of the reclamation, chiefly through the littoral plantings shown in the blue on the screen. Those vary in width, or approximately 10 feet, and then have all required plantings per the Land Development Code along those preserve areas. So other conditions that will remain intact through the proposed amendment, again, it's simply to make this mine more efficient, allow a currently impacted mining area to achieve additional material extraction that can support development and growth in this area of the county. So we see that as a positive that we will tie to the LEAP plan later in the presentation. All other conditions of the zoning remain intact through this amendment. That would include the conservation areas, all the setbacks negotiated through the years, limitations on access, hours of operation, and the monitoring has been further enhanced through the conditions that the applicant is in agreement with staff on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ted Treesh to discuss transportation.
Good morning, Ted Treesh, TR Transportation Consultants. We conducted the traffic study for this project, although brief. The analysis concluded that the depth increase really does not have any change in terms of the trip generation characteristics of this facility, because as it previously indicated, the operations that occur above the ground aren't changing. We're simply just providing more material that's available to extend the life of the facility. So the operations that are currently going on aren't changing. So the trip generation that's currently happening on the property are going to be maintained. So the processing facility is what really drives the trip generation of these types of facilities. So that's going to remain intact and not going to be changing as part of what's before you this morning. So the trip generation is going to remain the same. There's no change in the access to the property. We have one access to State Route 82. The turn lanes are all currently existing, so that's not changing as well. So that's really all the comments I have in terms of this project.
From a policy perspective, is that borne out in other depth increases that you're aware of, that there has been no change in the trip generation that's occurring? And my question is because I'm curious why this is a requirement, right? Because if that's the case, that there is no net trip generation that's occurring as a result of the depth increase, why is that a requirement in the LDC that requires an applicant to look at that?
That's a good question.
Is there data that supports it? I mean, are you
We
aware?
haven't gone back, and the only other one I was involved with was one on Corkscrew Road, on Alico Road for CMEX several years ago, where we asked for a depth increase that was approved, but we didn't go back and do the counts afterwards. But the way the operations of these facilities, typically what they do is they remove the material from the ground and stockpile it on the property and then the material is then processed and then hauled off the property after it's been processed. And so the removal of the material from the ground doesn't really impact the trip generation. It's what comes out of the processing facility, and then the trucks, the loading of the material onto the trucks, and then the trucks leaving the property is what the trip generation is based on. So it's not, and the stockpiling is done on a daily basis, and the material is there stockpiled, and the processing facility is what is the limiting factor. The facility can only process so much material per day, and then that material is then set aside and then loaded on the trucks. And again, it's based on a demand. The material is sold based on a demand basis. So if there's a big project being done by FDOT or Lee County, such as the I-75 widening or the Alico Road extension is coming up, the material that's coming out of this facility is, the lime rock is FDOT certified, so as big FDOT projects come on board, the trip generation may increase as the facility sells more material. As those projects end, the trip generation goes down. So it's a very fluctuating. Lee County did a mine study probably 14, 15 years ago where they surveyed many mines in Lee County. They actually did traffic counts at all the mines that were existing at the time that showed that fluctuation. And that's what we did, traffic studies for a number of years as new mines were coming in for applications. But we haven't done any studies to look at what the actual depth increase does. But just from a common sense and operational characteristics of the facility, the trip generation is really driven what happens from the processing facility beyond to the truck actually leaving the property.
In the TIS, I think you said the mine operator reported 444, I'm going off memory, something in that range
Yes.
of daily trips, and that's expected to maintain for the duration of the mine, whatever that ends up being?
Well, again, that's just based on an average, based on the amount of material. That's how we developed the methodology with Lee County a number of years ago, where we just took the amount of material that was expected, and we said, okay, based on an average demand, and then we looked at the amount of material that you could load on a truck, and then we based on the trucks leaving. But again, if there's a higher demand, that may be a little higher. If there's a lower demand, it'll drop a little lower. So it's just, trip generation is fluctuating. You know, I get up here and testify on trip generation every time we have a hearing, but again, it's based on averages. You know, even ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, is based on averages of uses. So that 444 is just simply an average. It may be higher, it may be lower on certain days, but that's an average.
And the zoning doesn't require it, but do they report the truck counts to the county through a DO or any other kind of approval?
Do we have a monitoring condition
I
in the
did not see
zoning?
one in the zoning.
Not truck.
So I'm curious if it's required in a different approval, because it wasn't required in this one.
Yeah.
And then my last question was the transportation routes was another thing that needed to be looked at. Is that going to change with the different roads that are coming, the Alico extension, for example, since that will be proximate to the site? Is that looked at all through the TIS?
What's that again?
One of the review criteria is that they have to address the transportation routes, including anticipated traffic to and from the mine, based on the updated TIS.
We didn't look at that in this case, just because this is an existing mine, it's already got its access approved. I think that's for new mine applications where,
It's under 121J,
right.
so we can put a pin in that to come back to it. It's 5. I didn't see it.
And our access is onto a state highway,
Correct.
State Route 82, so. What's that?
Yes, I
Yeah.
had one more question before you moved. The TIS said that the lane improvements that were required on 82 had been done prior to
Yes.
the FDOT expansion, and so then it sounds like they were removed and then replaced by FDOT.
When
It
they-
said there was a right-in, and it sounded like there were left and right turn lanes that were put in, but I did the site visit, I only saw the right lane turn in. I don't think you can go left at that location, is that correct?
Do we have an aerial photo in our slides?
Slide 3. Oh, that might work. You might have passed the best aerial we have, yeah.
That is?
That's likely.
But there is, yeah, Bell Road it is a full median. There is a left turn lane to turn left in.
I have an aerial.
Do you have a more current aerial? I just did the site visit on Saturday on this site, and they have or I don't know what you call those, in the road so that you cannot turn left.
Oh, did they put the flex stakes in the median? Yeah, that's FDOT's temporary. They're doing a temporary median changes along State Route 82.
Okay. So there will be, that's
You
why I
can,
wanted.
you can turn left in. There is a left turn lane. You can turn left in, but not left out right now.
Right now, that's blocked as of Saturday, just my own personal observation. So maybe I see the aerial that's up here. I don't know when that was done.
Yeah,
I just
they're
wanted-
converting these full unsignalized median openings on a temporary basis to directional median openings where you can turn left in but not left out. And we are in discussions with FDOT right now to have discussions with them regarding our trucks, because it is a safety issue on the trucks doing U-turns
That's my question.
on
So is
State
that-
Route 82. But, so we are in discussions right now with FDOT's project manager for that project.
Okay, but the intention is that there would remain a left out at this facility.
We're talking to them right now. It's like, are you sure you want our dump trucks doing U-turns? But it's FDOT's road. We're at their mercy when it comes to the access. But they've done this on several other medians in the last few weeks, and if you've watched the news and the press, it has gotten quite a bit of press coverage in the last few weeks. with those changes. I'm working on a project on Blackstone as well that they just did that too. So those improvements are supposed to be temporary until these locations meet warrants for a traffic signal. That's why they're using these temporary flex stakes as a temporary condition because of safety measures at the current time. And again, as I said, we are in discussions with their project manager to ensure if this is the best location for those because of the heavy trucks. Dump trucks take much longer, especially when they're full, to accelerate. And when they do a U-turn, they take much wider turning paths and much longer to accelerate. So we just want to make sure they're doing the right thing. But again, it's an FDOT right of way, so we're at the whim of their decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have something to add on the?
Sure. I just wanted to add on, Madam Hearing Examiner, for the record, Richard Aiken. I just wanted to add your question about traffic monitoring. So the MOP and some of the other approvals require traffic monitoring, so we do that annually as a condition of those anyway. It's not a condition of the zoning, but it's taken care of through some of the other approvals. Is how that's handled.
Thank you. And on the transportation routes, was there any, my question is there was a central processing facility that kept being referenced. It sounds like that's where the material is going, but I don't know where that is. Is that east? Is it west? Does it move? Does it depend on where the projects are?
Yeah, so on the transportation routes, if you just give me a minute to talk to Mr.
Yeah.
Treesh about it, and we'll come back to that before we conclude.
Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Kirk Martin with Water Science Associates. I'll be talking about integrated modeling, which is a requirement of this section of the code, but there's a whole lot more to it, though. It actually culminates in integrated modeling, so I'll be talking a little bit about that. But within that includes the description of the stratigraphy, that's how the formation segments are layered, the lithology, which each of those sections or each of those segments are made of, a discussion of hydrologic confinement. Confinement being beds are strata that water does not want to go through. Impediments become very important to how water flows underground. A discussion of historic water levels, particular to has the mine disturbed or caused some sort of trend that we don't like in historic water levels. And finally, all that culminating into the integrated model. So just on the geology, lithology, and stratigraphy, there were 3 separate investigations over several. Yes, ma'am.
Slow down just a little bit.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
I'm just not as familiar with your terminology.
Sorry. I've been accused of that before. So there were 3 investigations that took place over several years. Each of them had a different purpose, and there were different ideas for what the mine was going to be at the time. So, but all 3 together, in my mind, put together a really nice, comprehensive view of what's down there. So the one in 2003 was down to depths of 60 feet. The one in 2017 was depths of 50 feet, and the one in 2019 were down to depths of 90 feet. So we got a good overview. Basically, there's pretty good consistency with about 10 to 15 feet of unconsolidated sand at the top, 40 to 50 feet of limestone, that's the product that they're selling, underlain by 10 to 15 feet of silty sand, and then finally, occurring at about a depth of 70, that's silty clay, very dense, high plasticity, it's gooey. If you throw it against the wall, it sticks. Water doesn't want to move through that. The site, we had a number of borings, and so we actually had the map you see on the left is showing the depth to the regional confinement bed. So you can see that it actually goes from about 70 feet to a little over 80 feet in depth. And I've drawn a cross section across there, so you can see again the fine sand, 10 to 15 feet, 40 to 50 feet of limestone, 10 to 15 feet of silt, and then finally the clay. Of interest to the silt, I've testified many times about the nature of clay being something that an excavator can find very readily. It's very different than the limestone, but you are hitting confinement there, essentially. In this case, we've got this layer of silt. It's not as porous as the limestone, but it's a lot more porous than the clay. So there's actually a little warning before you even get to the clay. More importantly, however, we're only asking for a depth of 60 feet, and everything out there we're seeing is at least 70 feet in depth. So we just don't see any problems with the excavation to that depth. To the integrated modeling, There was a model that we created in 2022 for the Lehigh Acres Municipal Services District. The reason I bring this up, it was a quasi-government model accepted by a number of agencies for use in analyzing groundwater and surface water. I want to bring a point about integrated modeling. When you talk to surface water modelers, they will calibrate their models by making the water disappear into the ground at inflows. Groundwater modelers make it disappear by evaporation or runoff. In other words, they don't have a complete model. When you do a fully integrated model of surface and groundwater, all those elements have to connect and all have to make sense. So it's really a very robust analytic tool to see if you're really getting it right. So we have a lot of confidence in it. The primary purpose was to determine if the mine deepening would cause any impacts to the water table aquifer, and by inference to environmental features or offsite users, things like that. The model was very well calibrated. I'll show you that in a minute. The simulated water levels remain the same between the current planned, currently permitted depth of 40 feet and the proposed 60 feet, with no notable impacts on any hydro periods, waterways, wetlands, etc. With regard to calibration, we had 4 monitoring sites with a long period of record. The dots on the graphs on the right are the water levels that were measured, and the line is the model. So the first one is not so good in the beginning, but it really gets really good toward the end. But all the rest of them are really, really close. But more important, I'd point to the calibration statistics at the bottom left. The R-squared data correlation, just a quick background on that. R-squared of 0 means there's no correlation between data. An R-squared of 1 means there's perfect correlation. 0.89, basically 0.9 is really, really good calibration. The USGS typically US Geological Survey typically uses 0.75 as their criteria for decent calibration. We're getting 0.9 here, so it's really good. And the absolute mean error of about 0.4 to 0.9 tells you that we're no more than half a foot off at any given place. So again, I've seen the Water Management District use absolute mean errors of 2 to 5 being good, and we're well less than 1. So again, very good model. So this is the model results. Again, the same 4 sites we're using. The baseline was the 40-foot currently permitted depth of the mine. The red line is the proposed 60-foot depth, and you can see they just lay on top of each other. There is no change in that. And the primary reason is because we haven't breached any confining beds. As noted, the confining beds are down at 70, so there's really no reason you'd expect it, but again, the model proves that out the way it's supposed to. The monitoring, we've got 4 monitor wells, all tapping the sand portion of the shallow portion of this sequence is going on, I think, since prior to 2017. We've also got 1 well we test for water quality. And what we found is, I inserted the graph on the right, but basically those are the water levels for all 4, actually 5 sites. There's 4 wells and 1 staff gauge over the past 4 years, 5 years. And essentially you can see there's some seasonal variation as you would expect, but there's no change, no trends, no cycles. It's basically we aren't affecting the water levels. If we were dewatering, you'd probably see some effects of that. That was not the case here. So anyway, the monitoring shows that things are going very, very well there, and we don't propose to change that. And finally, just my conclusions were the geotechnical data shows that the confining bed's depth ranges between 70 and 80 feet. Ongoing monitoring shows no trends related to mining operations, and the calibrated Mike sheet model shows that there'd be no impacts from this proposed deepening. Questions? Was that slow enough? No? Sorry.
But we got through it. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Again, Alexis Crespo on behalf of the applicant. I'm just going to close out with discussion on the LEAP plan policy compliance as well as land development code criteria compliance. So to start on LEAP plan consistency, the underlying future land use categories are, again, density reduction, groundwater resource, and wetlands outlined in 1.4.5 and 1.5 of the LEAP plan future land use element. DRGR explicitly allows natural resource extraction, mining activity, so this is a permitted use within the future land use category, subject to hydrologic modeling and ensuring that the historic groundwater and surface water will not be negatively impacted by such activities. We've demonstrated through the application materials, the conditions of approval, as well as the testimony you just heard from Mr. Martin, that we will fully comply with the hydrologic monitoring and modeling requirements in this future land use category for the proposed use. It's also an existing mine that's in place today, which is important to note in terms of consistency. And the property is outside existing well-filled locations and travel time contours. In terms of the portion of the site that is jurisdictional wetlands and subject to that future land use category, we've noted those areas are delineated on the master concept plan. They are under conservation easement. The appropriate upland buffers are in place, and there's no change to reclamation, and in fact, enhancement to reclamation has occurred, increasing consistency with this policy. And I've noted that the DEP has monitored and been on site to look at the mitigation that's occurred and signed off that it's all been done to the requirements of the permit. Policy 5.1.5 is protection of existing and future residential areas. The first bullet there is we must evaluate that in context to the Southeast Lee County Planning District. It's a dynamic, diverse area of Lee County. It's got some residential, large lot, as well as agriculture, mining, master plan communities. It's really got everything. We also have Lee High Acres to the north of State Road 82 that we interface with. The mining operation, again, has been in place, coexisted for many years with the surrounding land uses. The approvals date back to 1990 originally, so this has been an occurring use. Over the years, as the mining operation has evolved and been amended through the zoning and development order process, as well as Chapter 12, we've enhanced compatibility with 5.1.5 through that 12-foot tall berm and landscaping anywhere where the mining is going to be interfacing with either adjacent lands and or the public State Road 82 right-of-way. And then predominantly the edges of the mining operation are under conservation easement as permanent preservation. And so we do have some farm worker housing on Cicada Seed to our west, but based on the distance of our operation, we're about 1,800 feet away from their property line in terms of mining in that area. And also of note, the efficiency that this IPD amendment will bring in terms of generating additional much-needed construction materials for a fast-growing area and allowing that to occur within an impacted existing mine where the neighboring properties have interfaced with that operation for decades in lieu of going to new greenfield locations that could interface more closely with existing lower density residential uses. Goal 10 is the overarching kind of, I'll call it the mining goal of the future land use element, where it talks about a variety of aspects of mining. The first couple objectives really speak to that efficiency, wanting to minimize locations of mining and really maximize the existing mine areas in order to limit natural resource impacts. So we are fully in compliance with Goal 10 and the support of objectives 10.1, 10.1.1, and 10.1.2, and that we are using an approved lime rock mine to generate more materials by going to the depth of 60 feet, which we have provided data and analysis will not breach any of those confining layers that would result in additional negative impacts. 10.2, objective 10.2 in support of policies, this gets more into the natural resource protections aspect of it, the reclamation, protection of surface and groundwater, as well as wetland areas. We do have, again, 189 acres of wetland under permanent conservation easement. The FDP has released this, and the wildlife surveys have been completed and approved as part of the LDO processes. Reclamation has evolved over the years. It's been enhanced, and we're not proposing any changes to the latest set of enhanced reclamation conditions. We do have robust monitoring conditions that have been in place since 2014 that will continue, and we've actually added an additional monitoring well location, well number 5, as shown on the revised master concept plan series and revised conditions. The last area of Lee Plan consistency that we'll touch on here is Goal 33, which is your Southeast Lee County Planning Community. goal and supportive objectives. Again, this section of the comprehensive plan, as well as the DRGR policy, explicitly allows mining. It wants it to be done in an environmentally sensitive way where there's checks and balances in place to ensure the environmental integrity of the area, as well as surface and groundwater is maintained. We've demonstrated compliance with all of these policies by the data and analysis submitted with the application and testimony you've heard today. I'll note there's other policies highlighted in the staff report, as well as the applicant's narrative that we'll submit into the record as part of the staff report. In terms of the Chapter 34 findings, Chapter 12, as we've discussed, allows us to seek this minor amendment for the depth increase, and it defers us to Chapter 34 in terms of the criteria to approve such increase. Per the application materials and the testimony today, we are compliant with the LEA plan, the underlying future land use categories, and all applicable goals, objectives, and policies that guide lime rock mining. We meet all the code requirements and regulations. There are no deviations associated with the IPD, either prior to this amendment or as proposed through this application. We've demonstrated compatibility with the existing and planned uses through the enhanced conditions that have evolved over time, largely in response to that private settlement agreement in 2021. Ted Treach has testified on sufficient access. We do have direct access to an arterial roadway, which is what you would want for a mining operation to limit traffic on smaller local roadways that may have more direct residential traffic. And the TIS does address that the project will not result in increased trips due to the nature of the operation. We demonstrated will not negatively affect natural resources through the additional hydrologic modeling and reporting provided by Kirk Martin, and then all in terms of the environmental wetlands habitat, that's all addressed through the conservation easements. This is the appropriate area of the county where this type of use is explicitly allowed, one of the only places in the county you can do something like this, and it's obviously a long-standing existing mining operation that we're just, again, maximizing efficiency of. And the conditions, we're entirely in agreement with staff that these will protect the public interest and ensure compliance with the code. So to conclude, this is the appropriate application and process per Chapter 12. We're consistent with the LEA plan. We are not altering the many conditions of approval, and this will simply allow for efficiency of the existing lime rock mining operation to avoid having to go into other portions of the county to get the required materials. And with that, I think we have a few questions we need to clean up that Richard may be addressing. Thank you.
Ted Treach, for the record, just back on the haul routes. We discussed the only thing, the haul routes aren't changing from what currently exists. State Route 82 to then various points beyond that. With the Alico extension coming online, I think construction is supposed to start, based on the last thing I saw from DOT, in the next probably 12 months, the initial construction of Alico Road. So that'll be up online probably next 2 to 3 years. Then that'll add another route for obviously potential, that's a route that might be used for material deposits from this facility as well. So, but we don't anticipate any changes in haul routes based on this application.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The last question I had was still just about the processing. I'm not sure who on your team to direct that to, but how is the material? Again, the other mine depth request that we had, there was a processing facility on site, so there was testimony that the plant itself could only operate at a certain capacity, so that all makes sense. But if they're removing it and hauling it, where's the material going, and what's actually stopping them from doing more material since they're able to go deeper?
All right, so thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner, and for the record, once again, Richard Aiken. I think I can answer a couple of these questions all together here. So if you look at the schedule of uses, it doesn't have a permanent plant on site. And this mine, if we go back in history, and if you'll remember, it was approved in 1990 as an IPD, right? Originally, it was a fill dirt pit, more or less, right? So there was no rock crushing site on plant, or plant on site, because there was no crushing to be done. And as material came out, there was rock that would come out with the other stuff. And so over the timing of approvals, eventually construction materials were approved as something that could be taken out of the mine and then taken off site, which is really the appropriate condition is whether it can be taken off site. So that's been approved. When it was originally approved, and now we have the MOP and the MDO, which regulate these things on site. There's never been a permanent facility on site for that, and it's been done mobily. And by the fact that it's done mobily, that does limit sort of how much can be produced. And there is, I don't believe there's any ability to really go through more material than what it is currently being done or what has been done at other times. At this point, I'm not sure that at this moment in time, they're getting close to the depth that they're allowed to go. So it slowed down a little bit over the last little bit. But in general, at the maximum production depths or the maximum production amounts, there's no ability with the mobile crushing to really, I think, go above that. You asked the question about, well, if you wanted to add a permanent site, what would you do? Well, it's not part of the schedule of uses. And so I think the only conclusion there is that it requires a public hearing and probably an MEPD in order to expand mining operations. Why we're not asking to do that. We're asking to remain within the existing allowed approval, which is for mobile crushing or mobile, and there are specific conditions in the MCP that prohibit where that can be done. And part of the reason for that is because there is no permanent site that says it's only going to be done here. Instead, it's sort of the reverse of that. It can't be done in any of these other locations. And if you look at the master concept plan with a combination of the setbacks, the buffers, the conservation areas that are in place, and the prohibited areas for crushing, there's really not very many opportunities for it to go any place other than where it has been. And so it will not increase the production to have additional burden on the roadway. And as far as other approvals in the future, I can't speak to what somebody might come in and try to do, but the other thing that Mr. Price just reminded me here is that the truck scale limits the capacities that are leaving the site as well. So that should be a sufficient safeguard on that. So have I answered those questions for you sufficiently?
Did. I'm sure you can appreciate the reason for my question is I agree with you. A plant does not seem like it's feasible, at least under the current configuration and what's been approved, and I agree you would have to go through an amendment to get that. So it's just confusing to have a note on the MCP that's now been supplemented that says it can't go in this location if it's not even an approved use. So that was the reason for the question, is just to clarify that the fact that it's going to be denoted on one of the master concept plans does not in and of itself create the use, which we all understand, but it does lead to some foothold for an argument potentially that one was contemplated. Same as dewatering, it's unusual to have a condition that says a use is not permitted, but if it is permitted by another agency, these are the things that you have to do. So I understand that we're dealing with a settlement agreement, which is outside the scope, and so we've got a number of things at play. I don't have objections to those things. I just want to be sure that it's clear on the record what's contemplated, what's being proposed, and what process would be required. Dewatering seems a little bit different because it is acknowledged in the conditions and still it's not on the schedule of uses. So when we can get into it again after we hear from staff and they may have some things to clarify that. There's just confusion points that I want to be sure are clarified on the record.
Okay. And I think the way I view the rock crushing, and maybe Ms. Workman will tell me if I'm wrong here, but is that there is no approval of a facility to do that, a plant, if you will. The settlement agreement contemplates, as far as I understand it, and as far as I understand the conditions and the additional map added to the MCP, that, hey, look, even these mobile facilities can't go in these locations, right? So it's incredibly restricted as to where the mobile facility can go anyway. And by process of elimination for all the places it can't go, it's very limited. And there is no possibility currently under the approval for a plant facility, a permanent rock crushing facility. That's how I view it. Maybe I'm just restating what everybody already has stated, but.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did that conclude the applicant's presentation?
Unless you have any questions for us, it does, yes.
I asked as I went through, and we'll hear from staff. I want to take a break, though, before we do that, so maybe 5-10 minutes, so we'll resume either at 10 or 5 after 10 when everyone's back.
Thank you.
We're back on the record, and if staff is ready, we can begin with your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. For the record, my name is Beth Workman. I'm a principal planner in the zoning section. I have been accepted as an expert in the Lee Plan as well as the Land Development Code, and I wish to be accepted today as well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So I have a little bit of housekeeping. So the first thing is the PowerPoint, and I gave the PowerPoint to the applicant.
Thank you. So that'll be staff exhibit 3.
Thank you. The second document is some housekeeping that I emailed to the applicant on Friday, and then I gave a paper copy to this morning as well. And I'll give you.
Thank you.
So the first document is the letter of authorization. Ms. Ekblad is the planner on the case during the review process, had a conflict with today's hearing, and so this is the letter of authorization from Mr. Price to allow Ms. Crespo to present the planning portion of the project. The second is attachment D of the staff report. It makes the changes to the master concept plan to a 6-page document and adds the settlement agreement exhibit G, crushing plant exclusion area exhibit that was part of the settlement agreement. And then let me get to the page. The very last condition, it would be the condition 17, ended without finishing the sentence, an error from the natural resources condition. So staff finished that thought, and it's in the underlined portions for the attachment D. And then staff added exhibit G, which clarifies where the mobile and fixed crushing plant is not allowed as part of the condition. The condition as read can be very kind of clunky out of the settlement agreement. We can't change that because it's in the settlement agreement. So exhibit G kind of clarifies where that location is. And then the monitoring well map that was originally attached did not include the orange dot, which is the southernmost additional well that's part of a condition that Natural Resources has provided. And so that is the COA 30437 project, Bell Road Mine. It's the pertinent features map done by Water Science, and that shows the additional well that's being proposed in orange. And then the other two maps, or the one map and the last barrier trench, were in the original. So that kind of clarifies. I wanted to give that complete document. And the 48-hour letter had the additional well map in the applicant's 48-hour letter, and so staff just took that and replaced the map that was originally in the with the master concept plan as part of your review.
Thank you. So then just to go back through, I'm going to
Sure.
separate out the letter of authorization. I'll label as exhibit 4, staff exhibit 4, and then the revised conditions that I believe applicants said they're in agreement with will be staff exhibit 5, and that's what we'll operate from moving forward.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the PowerPoint presentation recognizes that new monitoring well map as well, so everything's consistent.
Thank you.
So the case before us today is a Seagate Mine IPD amendment. It is DCI 2025-00002. The request, as the applicant mentioned, is to amend an existing approved construction materials mine totaling 503.75 acres. It's to allow an increase in mine extraction depth from 40 feet to 60 feet, or top of confining layer, whichever comes first. The location of the mine is 21260 State Road 82. The property is located in southeast Lee County Planning Community. It is located in the Density Reduction Groundwater Resource Future Land Use category, otherwise known as the DRGR. It's in the Wetlands Future Land Use category, and it's currently zoned Industrial Plan Development. So Mr. Aiken went over this in detail, and I kind of compare it to, you have to get the key in the right hole to be able to get to an existing mine defined in order to get to the amendment process. So to do that, what staff did was research all the previous approvals to make sure, number one, that the master concept plan that is being provided is still alive, that it hasn't expired, because that's one of the key components, is to make sure that the industrial plan development has not expired, and that the following mining development order, or in this case, the limited development order, and the mining operation permit are still alive. So in this section of code, LDC 12-121J, approved as an industrial plan development under Chapter 34 and has valid current master concept plan in place, and that it has the right to pursue mining activity on either a special exception or IPD zone property, has not expired under the terms of the zoning approval. So that's what we're getting at on this first couple slides. Then once we get past that and establish that we are an operating mine, then we can get to what is allowed in the amendments. The amendments are limited to the dewatering, an extension of the mine duration, or the depth increase within a previously approved mining footprint. And that's the one that the applicant is after, is the increase in depth going from 40 to 60. So are we an active mine? And Mr. Aiken went over this thoroughly. I just kind of want to gloss over some of the things that were approved in each one of these. So it was 1990. The applicant at the time submitted to rezone the property to industrial plan development. In the 1990s, that was the way you went, is an industrial plan development. Mining excavation plan development didn't exist. Chapter 12 didn't exist. So it allowed for the applicant to go to 40 feet or the current ground level or confining layer, whichever shall first occur. There was no blasting. There was a corrective resolution done to the resolution Z90-017 to approve a phase 1 consisting of 60 acres designated to Sun State Excavation. That is the Eden Ski Lake. So phase 2 through 5 consisted of 447 acres, and the maximum excavation depth was established at 40 feet, where it is today. In 1991, an amendment was done to resolution Z90-017. It removed the restriction on blasting. It maintained the depth to 40 feet. In 2004, there was a resolution. So we went into a full resolution for resolution Z04-047. It approved to allow mining to resume because there was an interruption and maintain the 40-foot depth. In this zoning resolution, it allowed for rock crushing and screening to occur, the open storage of those materials once excavated, on-site water retention, the administrative offices that are on the uses today, as well as the caretaker's residence that are on the uses today. There was an amendment in 2014. It removed condition 1B to eliminate mining duration and related phasing scheduling. And it approved the 20-year limitation to the mine. At this particular time, Chapter 12 came into existence. So what happens on an amendment with an applicant is when you're removing a condition or we're looking at an amendment under Chapter 12, we see if the amendment, the applicant can move closer to compliance with Chapter 12. So 12109E1 approved a 20-year limitation because we're trying to inch closer to becoming conforming with that new code. In 2020, Z20-024 was approved. It extended the expiration of the master concept plan to October 24, 2034. So this allowed the mine to keep going. It didn't change the depth to what we're looking at today at 40 feet. It removed condition 12, condition 12 prohibited construction materials and mining uses. So this is important because it wasn't allowed before and now they're adding it back in. So now we're coming into conformity with Chapter 12. We're looking at the increased littoral shelf. That's a requirement of Chapter 12 for reclamation. So after the mine is done, they come in and reclaim the lake, and they work on the edges to put littoral shelves in for water quality. The addition of water quality monitoring was added to that, all coming into compliance with Chapter 12. So then 2021, there was an amendment, and the amendment was as a result of a settlement agreement. So there was a private settlement agreement that went through between the east and west properties to the mining operator. So in that amendment, there was a settlement agreement. That settlement agreement prohibited dewatering to facilitate removal of earth materials and prohibit rock crushing in certain areas, and then delay excavation in certain areas on the property. So through that came Exhibit G that staff added to the master concept plan that limited the rock crushing area and the plant, if that was something that was going to move forward, as well as a barrier trench between the east and west properties. And that's part of the master concept plan that we added. So the barrier trenches are right in this region right here. And this exhibit is part of the master concept plan, and right here. And so and this is Cicada Seed, and this is Eden Ski School. So in these areas, you see the cross section here, and the cross section is this trench area. And this is important because this stems to the dewatering. If they move forward with any dewatering, the trench is going to have to go in regardless in our LDO plans. But if they move forward, we have barriers in place that we are monitoring, as well as the water quality monitoring that goes with this as part of the condition of the zoning. So that was all done in an administrative amendment. An ADD came in, and all these conditions were put in place along with the zoning resolution that was already approved with additional conditions too. So what we're doing in this application today is taking all of these conditions and putting them into one resolution where they can all be found. So the barrier trench, where they're located, and then also where this mobile or fixed crushing plant is not allowed. Because the condition is like the northerly eastern 2100, is like very confusing. So this exhibit was very important to add so you know where you can and cannot rock crush. Mobile rock crushing happens currently right now because, as you remember, the uses were changed to allow construction materials to be excavated and processed. So it's also important to note on the front of crushing plant and mobile rock crushing is that when the industrial plan development was first approved, the LDC didn't have rock crushing soil, anything like that. So they were processing on site and it was leaving the site. So when we came into compliance with Chapter 12 puts some parameters on that. So if you're going to mine a site, you have a development order. It's a mining development order. That allows you to make a key cut and excavate. And you can process on site. So you stockpile, process, nothing leaves the site until the mining operations permit comes into play. This mine has LDO, which acts as the mining development order, as well as a mining operations permit, both of which are not expired, and you'll see that in the coming slides. The importance of this is the mining operations permit, and this stems to the traffic and the crushing. The mining operations permit has monitoring that goes on that per Chapter 12-116. And that has monitoring reports that come in to know the status of what's going on with the mine. And it gives the monitoring of the truckloads, where the crushing is occurring, that and the parameters behind that per 12. So that's the checks and balances. Also stemming, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, but stemming to the traffic impact statement. In the application, the number of scales, the truck wash, they're not changing. So if we think about the processing that happens, they mine the site, they stockpile, mobile rock crushing happens, it moves into the trucks, goes through truck washing and scales. That's kind of like a stopgap. It's kind of like, the area where everything becomes bottleneck. If it's really successful and they're really producing, there's going to be a lineup of trucks waiting to get through the scales and the truck wash. So that kind of controls, that's the release valve on that. There, in the schedule of uses, there's no plant, there's no building. If the applicant chooses to go that direction, that would flip the switch on a mining, an MEPD. And that is part of the amendment that we just went through, the parameters. It was dewatering, the life of the mine, and then going deeper. That's it. So if they go out of bounds of the uses, then that trip's coming in and the MEPD process would then come into play. So the applicant submitted on April 15th, 2025, a request to extend the expiration based on the tolling and extension as part of an executive order at the state level. And so a new expiration for the master concept plan was established to September 13th, 2041. And then the mining development orders that I just went over and the mining operation permit. So this development is an LDO 2003-403. This has been kept alive through the process being under the threshold of tripping an MEPD or going to a mining development order. So it's working under the LDO, which acts as a mining development order. And what that LDO does is it has on-site excavation, allows the off-site hauling of excavation materials. This is where it differs from Chapter 12. In 2006, this was issued. It was LDO 2003. It allowed for the off-site hauling. The preservation of open space and installation of required buffers that were established, and Ms. Crespo went over, the turn lanes that were put in, and then FDOT came in and redid the turn lanes, and then the buildings for the caretaker and the administrative offices. So that established that plan for the LDO. And then the mining operations permit came in 2016. So Chapter 12 was in play at that time. That was issued, and it expires November 30th of 2040. So it's still alive. That allows for the owner to transport off-site. And then in 2020, an amendment to that LDO came in to demonstrate compliance to the Resolution Z2024. And if you remember, that was the reclamation plans. It was bringing it more into compliance with Chapter 12. And that approval established an expiration date of June 27th of 2034. So now we have an active development order, and we have an active mining operations permit, and we have an active master concept plan. So now we are an existing mine, and we can go ahead and review the depth increase, which the applicant went over in detail, the sections 12-121J1C. That establishes when you're doing an amendment to go deeper, what the requirements for submittal is, and then 34-83 and 34-145, which is the lead plan in the land development code and compatibility with surrounding uses. So the first thing on 12-121 J1C1 is the updated traffic impact statement, and Mr. Treesh went over the existing access, the turn lanes, the movement that's happening. There's no changes to the footprint of the mine. They're only asking to go deeper. There's no additional processing operations, which means additional scales or rock crushing. In the TIS, it was mentioned that this would trigger additional traffic. So and that gets us to the level of service of C, which states that there's no impact to the trips that are happening, and as of the bottleneck that happens with the existing scales and truck wash. So integrated surface and groundwater modeling, that is section 12-121 J1C2 and 3. I always learn a lot when Mr. Martin talks. So this chart that was in Water Sciences report allows staff to look at, okay, you want to go to 60 feet in depth, is it necessary? Where's the limestone at? So you can see that this is the soil borings, and it allows staff to see, okay, yeah, your limestone is here. It also looks at where the confining layer could possibly be. And Mr. Martin went over in detail very effectively, demonstrating that the silty sand is almost like your caution, your yellow flag saying, hey, stop, we're getting close to the confining layer. So through that, the applicant analyzed the historic water level data, the use of the modeling, and established that the increase in depth is not going to negatively affect the surface or groundwater. Also, staff wanted to point out that this mine has been under a monitoring program since 2014, so we do have up-to-date water quality monitoring going on with the monitoring wells, piezometers, and staff gauges. And I just note that this is the new map that I added to the master concept plan, and then there's a condition 17 that gives direction for the development order when it comes in to show the increase in depth. The other requirement is to provide a narrative in 12-121J1C5. This just goes over what is happening. The applicant is going to 60 feet. There's no increase in the scales, truck wash, and processing equipment. The applicant is providing the monitoring wells. The upland and wetland conservation preserve areas are established, and they're in a maintenance and monitoring stage with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So they've passed the first stage and they've gone into the maintenance and monitoring with them. And Lee County has received all up-to-date monitoring on the preservation areas. During the review of this application, we did get everything updated in our database for this mine. And so there's no impacts to wildlife with the depth increase. And this is just the permits that are existing. So right now, the applicant has a permit to go to an excavation depth of 60 feet. The only thing is they're waiting on the zoning approval because they're only allowed to go to 40. The permit on the left is the mitigation and preservation. This is the permit that states that they're in a maintenance function with FDEP, and these are attached to the staff report as well. And that meets the LDC section 12-121J1C6. So going through the Lee plan, Ms. Crespo went in detail with the Lee plan policy. We are in the density reduction groundwater resource future land use category that allows for extraction. Policy 33.1.7 analyzes the impacts of proposed land disturbances on surface and groundwater. Mr. Martin presented all of that in detail, that there will be no negative effects to go to 60 feet. 12-121J1C2, I went over in depth with the various excavation depths, the monitoring, the modeling of 4 points outside of the mine footprint that Mr. Martin went over, and will not adversely affect groundwater levels upstream, downstream, or adjacent to the site. And there's monitoring the barrier trenches that were part of the settlement agreement that are going in, that are kind of the monitoring for any dewatering that should occur per the conditions of the zoning. And the soil borings provide evidence that there is limestone, and it is 60 feet, so they need this to go retrieve it. So wetlands, as mentioned, there is a jurisdictional wetland determination. There is a DEP permit. Lee County has a development order that shows the conservation area. There's monitoring that has been ongoing through the life of the mine. It does protect the natural functions of wetland system, and it's in a maintenance position with Lee County as well as DEP. So 12-121J1C5, 4 and 5, it just, prior approvals established the 186 acre of wetland and the DEP permits and the up-to-date monitoring. So going over, usually this comes first, but because this is kind of like we need to get in the door on one area to get it to open the others, the compatibility with surrounding uses. So to the north is State Road 82. Across from State Road 82 is a strip of commercial development, commercial plan development, and C2 zoning districts. To the north of those Commercial zoning districts are residential Lehigh platted lots. And like Ms. Crespo detailed, that this mine's been going since 1990, and it's kind of evolved with the evolution of Lehigh coming online. So this has kind of been growing together. So compatibility has been happening since 1990 in the life of the mine. South of the property is AG2, and it's in a mine excavation plan development, Troyer Mine. This is in a settlement agreement to allow residential and commercial development of 6,000 acres. So the importance of this is that the land adjacent to this property is in that MEPD preservation and conservation lands. So it kind of marries up next to what is happening on the subject property. East, as talked about, is the commercial ski lake. There's protection measures in place through the original zoning as well as a settlement agreement, and the agricultural research facility as well has the same conditions for buffering as well as the settlement agreement barrier trench. I'm not going to belabor with the compliance with the lead plan for policy 5.1.5, protection of existing future resident areas, the encroachment. This has been doing this since 1990. I mean, as it waxes and wanes, coming into compliance with Chapter 12, the barriers that have been in place and the buffering. There's promote opportunities for well-planned industrial development. This, again, this has been growing since 1990 with the buffers and the barrier trench and where they're mining and setbacks and things like that. The natural resources extraction to minimize and eliminate adverse effects through efficient use of land. The setbacks to this were established way before the Chapter 12 setbacks were established. So this was in anticipation of protection of the surrounding land uses. And then the monitoring systems for surface and water, Mr. Martin went over in detail. Mining pit depths, this is a 10.2.4. They're analyzed at a case-by-case basis because mining can, where it occurs and the surrounding land uses is important to look at it as a case-by-case because the hydrological conditions can change and the neighboring uses can change as well as transportation. Reclamation is being proposed, 10.2.8. And then the protection of water quality through the monitoring program that was added to the zoning resolution. And then in conclusion, staff finds the request to increase the mine extraction depth of 40 feet to 60 feet or top of confining layer, whichever was reached first, to be consistent with the lead plan and land development code. Staff is recommending approval of the request.
Thank you, and thank you for providing the updated conditions. I appreciate that. Can you clarify a little bit again what the intent of the dewatering condition is? Because that would be subject to the limited amendment process, but is that the intention, that if they choose to do dewatering, they would need to go through the 12-121J process, or is it already addressed here and they could do that administratively?
It's already addressed in this. Because that dewatering condition came out of the settlement, with that comes that barrier trench. So that's the protection measure that was established in that settlement agreement. And staff, when we were looking at codifying everything into one, we struggled with keeping the ADD that was approved as part of the settlement outside of the boundaries of this amendment because of it being, standing on its own. But staff went back and forth to well, now we have this ADD that's still doing what it's going to do if we codify it. So if we can put it all in one spot and recognize the settlement agreement, we won't lose that document elsewhere. And through that, and the ADD, I remember reviewing it because I reviewed the part of the dewatering for environmental impacts during that process. It was all coming out of that dewatering condition, and we needed some protection measure to the east and west, and that allows it to be maintained in this to recognize the settlement agreement.
Let me go through my question. Are ag uses still occurring on the property? We retained that condition, but it would seem to me that there are no longer ag uses. Do we still need that condition?
you want to run through the questions and then take a break?
We can. I know that the ag uses, so back when Mr. Inge still owned the mine, I believe there were some, and I just don't know what the status of that is with Seagate. I don't know if there's a need to eliminate the condition at this point in time, or to probably just keep it as it is.
We can retain it if it's not an issue to anybody. It's just one of those things that we're doing cleanup, and there were several that were identified that they've been complied with, and that wasn't one, so it was not clear if that was still happening, but it's not an issue to me either way. And then there wasn't anything in the record that I could find about the quantity of the material. That's one of the things that needs to be addressed as well. Do we know what the quantity is, just so I can make mention of that in my report?
There was in the submittal, there was the narrative and there was also the operations sheet. And I believe it's stated in the operations sheet.
And we can, again, address this after.
We can, it's attached to the staff report and I can find that.
If you could find it for me. I went through everything and I did not see it, but I certainly could have missed it. I believe that was the extent of my questions. I asked the rest of them as we went through. Yes, I did. So that was the
Okay.
extent. Thank you. Okay, so that concludes the primary presentations of the party. So we would open public comment now. Did you want to speak, sir? Thank you. Please come to the podium.
She's going to pull up the map.
Thank you.
For the record, my name is Randall Johnson. I am station manager for Cicada Seed America. I've been with Cicada Seed for 31 years, and I'm also a plant pathologist. So, this is Cicada Seed America. We are a worldwide company, and we breed for vegetables throughout the world. If you eat broccoli, 75% of all broccoli, the genetics come from us in the world. We also, on this site, we specialize in watermelons. We breed for the world in watermelons. We also breed predominantly with peppers and tomatoes. I'm going to be brief here because, you know, Seagate has been, or Bell Mine, I'm not sure what it's called now. Is it Seagate Mine?
It's Belmont.
Bell Mine, okay. The owners and, you know, the people that are actually working there have been very good to us. They've communicated with us. They have seismic devices on our property. They're very respectful. They come in and tell us when they're there. So they've been good neighbors. What I'm going to talk about right now is traffic. And I was relieved to hear that there wasn't going to be an increase in truck traffic. However, and what I'm going to talk about here probably doesn't have a lot to do with the county. It has to do with FDOT, but indirectly it does have a little bit to do with the county because you're approving these things. And I just want to make sure because we have a lot of anxiety about traffic. Let me just give you an example here. So right here, Troyer has, with the new State Road 82, they have a median opening here. This is our entrance right here. We are not allowed to use that median opening, okay? I live in Cape Coral. Many of our people, we have 30 people that work at Cicada, plus, you know, temporary laborers. We can have as many as 60 people at one time working there. If you work in Fort Myers, Cape Coral, or whatever, you can't turn left here. You have to go right down to Bell Boulevard. And now I understand you can't U-turn there anymore. My concern is the nature of the truck traffic. You know, you're going from, I guess initially it was overburden, fill. Now you're going deeper. So almost all of that you're going to get out is going to be lime rock. And I know, you know, with the Alico project that there's going to be a lot of left turning from Bell Boulevard, which, you know, we're squeezed between. We've got Troyer Mine are estimating 1,600 truck trips a day. That's two-way. Okay, so there's a lot of traffic going in and out of here. You know, I'm not really sure with, you know, the Lime Rock, whether, and probably work, you know, selling to the state for, or the county for the Alico extension. I'm not really sure what that's going to look like. I'm not really sure if Bell Mine is going to stockpile a bunch of lime rock, and then, you know, in theory, the truck traffic hasn't changed, but if you have these bursts of trucks that are turning left, we're squeezed between. So this is our concern. We want to have some sort of assurances. We can't tell people, we can't tell our neighbors, you can't turn left here because, you know, we have a lot of people getting in and out. I just want to understand a little better, because this is, like I said, giving us a lot of anxiety, having two minds, you know, on both sides of us. So I believe that's all I really had to say. I'd like to hear some discussion on that.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today, sir.
Thank you.
Would you like to take a break before we come back for rebuttal and closing?
Yes, if we could take just a brief break. I was trying to answer your question about materials, so.
Thank you. Certainly, I would appreciate that. So we'll take, it's a quarter till 11, so we'll just break until 11. Unless you're ready sooner, you can let Maria know, and we will come back then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back on the record, and we could begin with the applicant's rebuttal when you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner, for your record. Richard Aiken again. So you asked the question about volume of materials and the estimates for the volume of additional rock that would be available as a result of the depth increase is somewhere between 6.5 and 7 cubic yards. Million cubic yards, yeah. Thanks, Kurt. And the math that these folks can do is quite amazing. So that's the number, and the TIS was done with that in mind. Finally, on rebuttal, there were some comments about simply traffic and the access onto State Road 82. And so Mr. Price has had some conversations with Sakata and Randy, and they're going to continue to coordinate with DOT. I know that Seagate has been working with DOT about the access, and you noted what you saw when you were out there. So they're working through that with DOT right now as best they can, and there's a shared access, so they'll continue to do that. As far as, Mr. Treesh already testified about the impacts of the depth. There are limitations to the number of scales and operational measures already in place to prevent the increase in traffic from a practical standpoint. There's also the monitoring requirements, as we've already stated, that are part of the MOP. So that's what I would state on that. Do you have any other questions for us? Anything we can help you answer?
I do not, thank you. Did staff have any concluding comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay, then thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So I will be issuing a recommendation in this case to the Board of County Commissioners, so they will set the final hearing on the matter, and everyone that is here will receive a copy of that notice once it's released. Thank you, everybody, for your hard work on this case and the completeness of the documents. Please stay safe and stay well. Thank you.